Thanks, our viewers, for continuing with us. You are seeing the rundown of that story. It's been quite the controversial caption of the week's developments, of course, in our government decision-making. And the government wants to palliate the healthcare system profession deficiency that we have with importation of Cuban doctors. And you know, I just asked myself, is that the president of our country still in too much love of Cuba and communist countries? Is our government merely playing maybe a political contestation game with our public service, civil service communities, starting with the doctors by trying to supplant or perhaps supplement their deficiency in this particular country? Or have the doctors become such a rogue horde of renegades and undisciplined citizens that need to be taught a lesson that they are actually not indispensable? Yesterday, the association of Uganda Medical Association and a different group of people, they actually lodged a complaint to the International Labour Organization demanding to give an explanation, or perhaps actually they lodged a case, that the government should explain on what basis the decision to make this importation of the labor force in Uganda was made. How is it legally acceptable in the international labor system? Let me just give you a slight backdrop in a minute about the overview of Cuba and the Ugandan relations on public health matters. It's quite a historic one. In the backdrop of a long-standing relationship, President Museveni met with the Cuban President Fidel Castro at a conference in Harare, Zimbabwe, in September 1986. That was shortly after Museveni had taken over power. So they set up a rapport to collaborate in a barter trade arrangement where the Cuban government would provide Cuban doctors and other tradables in exchange for agricultural produce and other products. Those of you who do not know much of the history of Museveni, he was a communist. Communism is a belief that actually there is a communitarian and egalitarian ownership of resources, and that people are supposed to collaborate, and we should not use any kind of capitalistic approach in the governance of society. So the Cuban government has been up to now, since Museveni's rise to power, training several Ugandan students as medical doctors. Apparently Cuba's health indices are more impressive. Apparently, the availability of medical services in Cuba exceeds that in most developed countries, with 6.7 doctors per 1,000 citizens, up from 1 in 1960. Because America has just 2.4 doctors per 1,000. So, on the backdrop of this particular story, we called Dr. Chris Bariomunsi yesterday, rather in the course of last week, wanting him to come and make explanation of this particular decision, but unfortunately our call was turned down. So in the house tonight, rather this morning, apologies on that, we have Dr. James Kayima, consultant cardiologist and a member of the Uganda Medical Association. We had initially called Dr. Ikwaro Buku, the president, but he's here to represent, and it's good to have you, Dr. James.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
All right. So let us get an understanding. The president of the Uganda Medical Association, called this decision a treasonable decision, and that the responsible person or people should face the general court-martial, then go to Luzira prison. Are you in agreement with this particular assessment and recommendation?
So I think Baldwin's, as Uganda Medical Association, we've been very clear about issues regarding importation of doctors. What we're clear about is that there is free movement of labor, and it's acceptable that you would come from Uganda and go to Tanzania or Rwanda and practice your trade if the situation enabling you to practice your trade in your country is not favorable, okay? And indeed, you know, just like you talked about the Cuban doctors coming to Uganda in 1986, in between 1989 and 1995, the South Africans imported Ugandan doctors to treat blacks in Soweto, in the Bantustans, and between after the genocide, 1995, Rwanda imported Ugandan doctors to go and treat Rwandese and to teach medicine to Rwandans.
But that was an emergency state.
Exactly,
really, out of a broken-
and that's our argument, that there should be a reason why you would import doctors. There was, the blacks in the Bantustan couldn't allow the apartheid doctors to treat them. So they asked that people from other countries be brought in, and they brought blacks that look like them to treat them. Seemingly, and in the same case, the Rwandese, they had an emergency, so they called in doctors to get the emergency treated. And what has happened actually is that over the last 20 years, the Ugandan doctors have told Rwandese doctors, and what's happening right now is that the Ugandan doctors are not needed anymore in Rwanda. Indeed, they're being thrown out of Rwanda. You make the argument that in case of emergency, this is warranted, and that's the exact argument that the UMA is making, that, tell us why you need to import doctors right now. What is the state of emergency? If that comes out very clearly, then we are okay with that.
How would it come to treasonability in terms of policy practice by government, as stated by Dr. Eboku?
So, the argument, in fact, the president has said it over and over again, and I wonder if this decision has passed by him. I think it was last week, while graduating.
Uganda Management Institute.
Uganda Medical Management Institute. Yeah. He couldn't understand why the public service, particularly called out Permanent Secretary Mitala, could give contracts to foreigners, whereas the Ugandans able to do these contracts. Okay? And even before that, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health castigated the use of foreigners in solving our health issues. So if at that highest level they think it's actually ridiculous, I think it's within the right of our very colorful president to call it treasonable.
For you, a medical practitioner, you're a doctor, so perhaps you're not so much indulgent in politics. But
no.
Museveni's politics is full of so many contradictions. But we need to understand, has there been an explanation given, besides, of course, this litigation that is being submitted to ILO, to give an underlying reason why they should actually make this importation? Because, of course, there are other speculations, but is there any reason being given by the Ministry of Health?
That's the explanation that we demand. In fact,
it hasn't yet been availed.
If Dr. Bariomus was here,
exactly,
he would probably be the person to give us that, because it's foolhardy that in a country that has 3,000 registered, about 1,500 registered specialists, you'd go out and import a specialist of any kind. In the subject of the previous industrial action was that we are available to work, but the tools of our trade are lacking. So when you do import the Cubans, are you going to provide the tools of trade? And we've argued that if you do provide the tools of trade, we're going to go out and work. And if you do provide what you're providing for the Cubans, by all means, we go out and work. But the argument is, what are you going to supply differently to the people of Uganda? Because these are the beneficiaries of our healthcare system, the people of Uganda. What are you going to supply differently? How are the Cubans going to serve differently than the doctors that have been trained over the years? You said in 1986, there was importation of Cuban doctors to start.
So many things actually in terms of barter trade.
And it was justified because we'd lost all our human resource to Kenya, to South Africa, to the US, to Australia. Makerere University was producing the best doctors, and they were being poached because of the political instability that was happening in the country then. And then it was justified to go out and get Cubans and bring them to do the work that, because there was lack. The question is, where is the lack right now?
Yeah, of course, as I said, you're a medical doctor, so you don't understand, rather sometimes you might not indulge yourself in those politics. Because he was more leaning to actually socialist countries, the associations with Argentina, which was still under socialist influence, associations in Nigeria, most of these revolutionary kind of centers, and Zimbabwe. And President Museveni on record, ideologically, he's a communist, okay? He has been compelled to believe in the free liberal market system and, of course, political liberalism by circumstances.
I thought over 30 years that had probably changed.
By force
because if you're willing to bring in foreign investors to create jobs, that's not very communist or socialist for that matter.
Yeah.
And we've argued that if you are able to bring in foreign investors to invest in health, because it's happening right now, we have pieces of land being doled out to foreign investors to invest in healthcare,
yes,
which is perfectly all right.
Investment different from importation of labor.
Yes, exactly.
Because you have the labor in full capacity.
Exactly. So investment different from importation of labor. So we have, you know about the Aga Khan University Hospital that's coming up in Nakuru. There was free land doled out to the Aga Khan, which is perfectly all right because we want to improve our healthcare delivery, and we're okay with that. And a communist doesn't behave like that. I think things have changed over the years, but that's not for me to say because, as you say, I'm no politician.
Okay, now, Dr. James, you are in a certain kind of catch-22 because the government of Uganda sees the Uganda Medical Association, especially its president, as having a political posturing. Because the government, machinery, and the spokespersons have labeled the president of your association, and perhaps that is implied that also the members are taking a political affront to the regime, playing politics with the platform of the Uganda Medical Association. You are playing to the public gallery by posturing that politicians are being paid much more and, inciting rebellion from your members themselves instead of concentrating on your work. So don't you think by being labeled as a political vessel of the opposition politicians, you have drawn yourself in a self-defeating campaign? If there is some element of politics infused, because with all the kind of analysis and the decipherance we are trying to generate from this particular decision, it can only run to being a political kind of contestation decision. That there is a way of marshalling prowess and clout by the government that, you people are not indispensable. You are trying to align yourselves with the outcries and, of course, with the narrative of the opposition politicians, and you're sounding like opposition politician force.
Maybe Baldwin's, what's your narrative here? If in your interface with the healthcare system of Uganda, what has your interface been? Outside, Kampala, what has your interface been?
No, it's been horrible. Let me actually give you just a personal experience.
Okay.
My wife had a very obnoxious and terrible experience in the hospital, in a national hospital here. We have a case in the Uganda Medical Council that has been running since 2016. It has not yet been resolved. So you know what you're talking about. So proceed. I think I need to.
Exactly. So we are not talking to the gallery. We're not speaking to the political gallery. We are speaking to the people of Uganda.
Yes.
Because the issues of health, until it comes out to bite you, you can never be, you can never really appreciate it. And it does not have color. It's not yellow, it's not blue, it's not green, it's not red. Okay? Once you interface with our healthcare system and the deficiencies therein, it doesn't matter which political affiliation you belong to.
But they argue that you're not cooperating with them, you're not sitting down with them, you have platforms where you can actually be able to discuss these particular disagreements and discrepancies.
Maybe you haven't been following the industrial action that has been suspended. And that suspension came about because the Uganda Medical Association sat in numerous meetings with the government of the Republic of Uganda, making very reasonable demands. And the demands were that provide us with the tools of our trade, and then we would ply our trade. Okay? And we didn't, the Uganda Medical Association didn't talk to opposition politicians. It spoke with government, with numerous interfaces with government workers, government leaders. As well, when the issue of the Cuban medical doctors came up, we've been talking to government, and we told them we were ready to work.
provide us with the tools of trade, as you would
Yes.
the Cuban doctors.
Yes.
Provide us with the remuneration as you are going to provide to the Cuban doctors, and give us a chance to see us deliver health care to the Ugandans. Yes.
Okay, so...
And that's not politics.
Yeah.
It's about the Ugandan healthcare, the Ugandan, and our aim to serve the Ugandans with honor. Yes.
Oh,
Because there are lots of issues about bringing Cubans here. One issue is, first of all, what's the reason? That's number one. Because we do not have a reason. Your medical schools in Uganda have graduated 1,500 specialists over the last 5 years. I'll give you an example of one group of specialists called anesthesiologists. These are the guys that put you to sleep when you're going to have surgery. And as well, before surgery and after surgery, they take good care of you, that your outcomes are good. And over the last 5 years, Makerere and Bara universities have graduated 52 anesthesiologists. And the government has employed 2 anesthesiologists. The rest are employed by the Uganda Heart Association, which granted is the Uganda Heart Institute, which granted its government about 2 or 3 of them. We've lost the rest to Swaziland, to Botswana, to Kenya, to Rwanda. When you get sick, you're rushed to the Aga Khan University Hospital in Rwanda, in Nairobi. And 1 out of 2 times, you're going to find a Ugandan trained anesthesiologist taking good care of you. And you're going to be happy that's happening. So we're producing specialists. We are losing them to neighboring countries. The argument about Rwanda has already been made, a country that has probably, whose economy is probably a quarter of ours, can be able to attract our healthcare workers and give them the tools of trade and give them the remuneration they deserve. So what we are saying here is that we do have the health workforce, and we would want to work with government to make sure that these regional referral hospitals are staffed.
Okay, the argument also, especially that comes from the politician, is that you people are not, you're not patriotic. You lack patriotism. We cannot try to compare our situation with other countries, and at the same time, I don't know, you need to confirm this. The number of Cubans that's supposed to be imported is about 200.
Yes.
And the dire situation, of course, also in terms of statistical argument, is that we have a very big gulf in terms of racial parity of a doctor to Uganda population, which is 1 to about over 1,000. And they are saying we are bringing these particular people to give a temporary supplementation, or in special to fill up the deficiency gap that is here. So you're not.
First of all, you talk about patriotism. Allow me to preempt you. You're talking about patriotism. This is a lesson of patriotism. Out of the 52 anesthesiologists that I talked about, 2 are on government payroll. 10 of them are working in Mulago as volunteers. That's patriotism.
Volunteers?
Volunteers. That's patriotism.
What does the volunteerism entail?
The government wouldn't pay them. They go out.
That is appalling.
The government, they go out and ply their trade in private institutions around town.
Yes.
And they are called to Mulago to volunteer. That's a lesson in patriotism. No one is as patriotic as that.
Okay, that's quite revelatory. Just tell me, inform me and my viewers slightly. Yes. Volunteerism, what does that entail? You mean there is no remuneration whatsoever? There are no incentives? What does that imply? That if a doctor, fully trained doctor, is called up at Mulago, is working as a volunteer? Because that informs actually me the reason why they behave in such either a very nonchalant and a severing kind of approach to treatment of our local civilians. What does it entail exactly, that volunteerism?
It entails them being paid a small, really a pittance to cover their transport, okay, to come to Mulago and do the work. But that's volunteerism. That the government can only employ 2 out of 52 in the last 5 years, and then the 10 are coming back to work with their colleagues. That's patriotism. Nothing beats that patriotism, okay? And we have so many examples of patriotism that the medical workers have actually, that the medical workers actually participating in this country. So being unpatriotic cannot be an argument.
Okay.
Never an argument.
Okay, now, let me tell you this, because as I said, this decision bends on politics. It's a political sort of triggered decision, and it has sent a message to most Uganda civil service labor force, starting with you, the doctors, that you're not dispensable. I want you to help me understand.
We would like to understand the politics.
Exactly. So what's your game plan forward to ensure that you realize your objectives and demands from this government without risking all of you being kicked out from the Uganda healthcare system? Because if this move has been taken, that means actually they can be able to escalate that particular number and get more doctors from elsewhere. They will work like mercenaries, and they don't have any political voice. They will not kind of agitate a certain affront against the system. So don't you think actually you're risking that? You're comfortable with it?
We're not risking anything, and this appeal is not is made to government of Uganda, because we are ready to speak with government of Uganda about the issues that are affecting Ugandans, because this is the Ugandan. Even if you brought 200 Cuban doctors and you took them to Moroto Regional Referral Hospital, what would they do there?
No, now what happens if they bring them?
No, they would bring them, but what would they do there?
They will supposedly give them the necessary...
Would the indices of the healthcare system change? Would the mother dying because they lack anesthetic machines survive because you have a Cuban doctor? That therein is the issue. So you could bring all the politics, talk about all, and you rightly said we are probably not very political. But we don't
understand actually that you're playing a political game. You're pitched against a political sort of fight, and which you either don't understand that you have submerged yourselves into,
I think you are underestimating the doctors. Yes, you're underestimating the doctors.
What shall they do?
But going back,
yes, because we need to understand the game plan.
We are civil in our approach. We are very civil in our approach, because since the industrial action, we've talked to government about the issues that are affecting the Ugandan, because ultimately he's the guy that's going to suffer. The Ugandan is the person that's going to suffer if the healthcare system goes all wrong. During the industrial action, you saw, just give me a minute.
Okay.
During the industrial action, you saw how wrong it went. Okay? So we appeal to government, and we've been appealing over the years, that you provide the tools of trade. Because if they provide the tools of trade, they can import the Cubans. We don't care. Okay? If they provide the tools of trade, we are ready to provide the service. And where they provided the tools of trade, we've actually provided the service. Let me give you an example. I'm a heart doctor, a consultant cardiologist at the Uganda Heart Institute, and we've been training cardiologists. You don't need Cubans, by the way, to train doctors in Uganda, because the doctors that we train are actually being poached. Okay? And most of the times, the only heart care that you'd get would be centered around Kampala. And right now we are training cardiologists for referral hospitals, regional referral hospitals. And recently, one of the doctors that we trained went to Jinja, and he was provided with a machine that diagnoses heart disease. And he's providing a service to the people in Jinja. So whereas you try to infuse politics in this, it's really a common sense issue. It's not political. It's common sense.
Yeah. Okay. So, in your own discussions with government, what is really the cause of the underfunding for the healthcare system, to the point that the doctors who are highly qualified and are doing private practice, of course, on their part, are simply on voluntary remunerative arrangements? What is the explanation given to you that you're not getting the necessary tools, the working conditions made right, and the remunerative advances made?
The Ministry of Health, through the Permanent Secretary, have stated that it's a resource envelope.
It's a what?
A resource envelope. That's not enough. But we argue that that if there's commitment to this cause, we would certainly find the funds to cover this, this issue. For example, right now there's commitment to bring in Cuban doctors, and the money has been found. Remember that there was there's been a cap on recruitment of health workers for the last 5 years. But when we found Cuban doctors, the money has been found. So I think there is, whereas the research envelope is not big, but also there is issues of commitment. Because we thought that because there is a cap on recruitment, certainly there is no money to recruit. But suddenly money has been found, and we think that it's it goes further than the research envelope being small or narrow. I think it's an issue of priorities. And we think that if you can prioritize bringing in the Cuban health workers, which is okay, because that means you do care at least a bit for the health situation in the country. We can work with you. And number one, the government is a proponent of buy Uganda, hire Uganda, build Uganda. And we're saying we could be partners in this situation of hiring Uganda, buying Uganda, and building Uganda.
Okay, just to understand your pedigree of clout, because you said that we are not a force to...
Yes,
the Uganda Medical Association, just help me understand clearly, what is the composition of the association itself? Is it just full of medical doctors?
Yeah, it's a doctors association.
How many are you?
It's a doctors association. We are about 5,000 doctors.
5,000 doctors? Yeah, and you're locally situated?
Locally situated.
5,000 doctors?
Yeah, and
fully developed medical doctors, or just...
4,941 doctors in the Uganda Medical Association.
Wow, okay.
And we're not a simple force.
That's quite a formidable force. Yeah?
And of those 1,173 are specialists, clinical specialists, excluding public health workers, because those two, the doctors who work in public health, are our members. So we are not a small force. And we are saying that because we are such a force, we want to work with government.
And now, because now also that makes the sentiment out there, especially to government, that because you're such an exclusive, skilled community, you're trying to hold this state captive, that actually tomorrow, if certain demands apparently that you're making are made, that tomorrow you will actually simply just escalate them and make them much more. And there was a spot, now the argument against also the competency you're advancing of the doctors and being extremely proficient is somehow rebutted by a study which was done by WHO in 2014 and found out that Uganda doctors in public service especially ranked low in the region. The report said that 42% of Uganda medics could not accurately diagnose major diseases. The situation was worse in public health centers offering only outpatient services, where half of the providers diagnosed none or only one of 5 tracer conditions. An estimated 58% of Uganda's medics got the diagnosis accurate, compared to 72% in Kenya, 57% in Tanzania, and 34% in Senegal. So now there is this kind of...
Baldwins, you should have acquainted yourself with that study before you brought that statistic here. What was the description of medics in this study? They went to rural health, which is probably non-existent in our country, and they got people that were treating diseases there. So most of the people...
Yeah, but it's still indicting on your profession, so you can...
On which profession? Actually, an indictment on our healthcare system rather than the doctors. Because you argue that we do not have doctors in rural health units, and you go and make studies in rural health units. What are you going to find? So you should acquaint yourself with that study and what they meant by medics in this case. They didn't mean doctors. It was the people they found in these rural health units treating mostly malaria. They would certainly miss a lot because you do not have doctors.
Which people were those?
Usually they are lower health card workers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So as we wrap up this,
before we wrap up, I like to attest to the proficiency of the health care worker in Uganda, the doctor in Uganda. They are very well trained. They are being poached
Absolutely.
And everywhere they go, they are, you know, they are praised about their professionalism and about their knowledge, skills, and attitude.
And certainly not only
Okay.
medical doctors, literally most of the professional realms. I have friends who graduated with me or who graduated before me.
Yes.
They're in other countries,
Yes.
and they're such phenomenal talent.
Exactly.
They're earning great. Here, the talent is abused, not even only in public service, but also private service. People just do not appreciate the talent.
Well, you say it yourself, the words do not come from me. You've attested to the sickness of our healthcare system.
Yeah.
You've attested to the professionalism
Yes.
that abounds in our country. We're just saying to government, you know, let's unleash this professionalism onto Ugandans and see how we can change the situation of Ugandans. You do not need to bring in Cubans.
Yeah.
We can work with you. And we've been working with you since the industrial action. We've been working with government to try and get these things right, and that's why I would be very happy to have you know, someone from the Ministry of Health or from government to discuss what's the reason, because we thought we were making progress. I mean, we've made progress. I mean, recent remuneration was improved a bit. Of course, the senior consultant still earns a third of what a doctor in Kenya earns, but we say let's let that work. Give us time and see how that works. Yeah, if there is any equipment that you're bringing for the Cuban doctor to work with, give us that equipment. See how we're going to work with it. Okay?
Yes.
And let's unleash our professionalism on the Ugandan. Let the Ugandan benefit from their sons and daughters. Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder how the Cuban doctors will treat malaria, how they would call musuja in Spanish, you know. So there's a lot of issues that abound about these Cuban doctors. When I go to practice medicine in the US, as I have before, you have very strict regulation because you're supposed to be able to speak English, okay? And you're supposed to sit exams. That makes you a worthy doctor to treat an American. And we wonder whether
before you start the practice, you need to be retrained.
Recertified. You need to be recertified. You need in
your
the
English
UK,
proficiency has to be tested.
You need to speak English to be able to communicate. Yeah, and I hope that the ministry have thought about all this, that, you know, before you unleash Cuban doctors to people in Nakapiripirit, they better be able to
speak the local dialect.
Not the local dialect, some level of communication.
Okay.
With the language,
so lastly, so what is your view of what's going to happen in the next 2 months, and if the Cuban doctors are actually brought, what is going to be your stand?
Our view is this,
the response rather.
You know, we are of the view, and I think it's your view too, that the comprehensive cost of importing Cuban doctors outweighs the benefit.
True.
They would need housing, which we're not provided for. They would need transport, which we're not provided for. They would need security. I don't need security to go to Mulago in the night. Furthermore, there's going to be a language barrier. So you're going to get nurses and midwives, instead of delivering babies, being called upon to act as translators. I don't know if they will understand the Spanish anyway.
It sounds like you want to sabotage these people. So if they come, what happens?
So
if they come, let's first leave out the difficulties and, of course, the cost implication. What if they come? What happens?
We think we're not going to get there. Why we think we're not getting there is that we are open to discussions with government. So, and we think that we've made a lot of efforts to make government understand that this doesn't make economic sense, it doesn't make professional sense, and it's not for the Ugandan, it's actually counterproductive for the Ugandan and for the Ugandan healthcare system, who are the Ugandan is ultimately the beneficiary of all the decisions that government does. And government is cognizant. I think a government feels for the Ugandan. And so we are open to talks. We appeal to government to immediately advertise 500 posts for specialist doctors with the offers, with the terms offered to the Cubans. And we pledge to mobilize Ugandan doctors to fill this up. Yes. And if we fail to do that, then by all means, you say, you know, we've done our part, but we don't see your doctors in rural referral hospitals. So we bring in the doctors, then there will be a justification. But we've been working with government since industrial action that has been suspended to try and sort these issues out. And we think we're going to continue working with them. We think you and I would make the government see that this decision is actually not a decision that appeals to the entire healthcare system of Uganda, and that because of that, they're going to rethink this, because it's their government pushes the higher Uganda, build Uganda, by Ugandan policy. So it would be foolhardy that the same government that does that is actually importing doctors, where you have plenty, but you don't want to use the plenty that you have.
And on that note, Dr. James Kaima, very grateful indeed to have you this morning. I believe you've given an incisive and insightful view and discussion about this matter.
You're most welcome.
We wish you all the best, and I think the public is behind you. That you
are you behind?
I am. I am. Not representing NTV, I'm not sure, but at least on my...
No, you're certainly representing the public out there who see through what you call the politics. We are not politicians, as you say, but we can only speak to the truth.
Okay, thank you so much. And viewers, thanks out there for keeping with us on this discussion. And we just appeal to government, because we are seeing a lot of profligacy and wastage of government, resources, public resources, with mindless, spending and remuneration of political officials who are just in political office, who are not productive at all. It's like politicians have become scavengers and parasites on our economic, system and the community that labors so hard. And the people who are sweating and suffering tremendously to make sure that this country is great are actually being suffocated. I think we need to have a redress on this. Government officials who are watching us right now, please make a redress to this kind of immoral behavior. It's extremely bothersome, and I think we need to make a better Uganda by becoming more concerned and disciplined on how we govern our resources and how we take good care of those who are sweating for our country. Thank you indeed for keeping watch with us. This is NTV, and we are your #1 station because you've made us to be that. I'm Karaga Baldwins. Please have a great day. We'll continue with the live broadcasting.